successful as a brand in market. I have to, hats off as always to brand innovators for keeping us connected. Our community is strong. We're inventive. We're powerful. We're creative. And it's groups like Brand Innovators that keeps us together, keeps the dialogue moving, keeping our industry and community forward. And I love today's content. I love the live cast series. I've been fortunate to be a part of it, to moderate sessions, to join as a speaker, to be here as a guest MC. It's amazing to be back with every one of you. And I get to look at our content today and all of our wonderful speakers, many of whom are repeat visitors to the Brand Innovators group. And that is where the dialogue moves forward, right? A continued conversation about our marketplace. And every one of our speakers today and our moderators just have such a wealth of knowledge to bring to the group. So I'm so excited to get everybody out here today. For everybody that is on the line and on the WebEx, be sure you include questions along the way inside the Q&A section. We'll be keeping track of those. The moderators will be grabbing questions per session. If I see some fun ones that I want to throw in there that I want to pull out, we'll definitely include them. As David mentioned, be sure hashtag BI Livecast on all your favorite platforms. Love to keep the conversation going. But I'm excited. When I look through this, through the content, I look through all the speakers today, it just makes me think how interesting and deep our industry is. There's so many different pockets of this marketplace. Travis is going to talk about Uber and their position in market and the way they continue to expand their business. We're going to get into shopping, user acquisition. Davina, who's going to open us up here with Travis, a wealth of knowledge in the advanced television space, an area near and dear to my heart in the television business. And so there's just so much depth of knowledge and so many different ways these conversations are going to unfold. So I'm really excited to get us going, to get everyone up and moving here. We are going to welcome our first speakers in. We're thrilled to be joined by Travis Freeman, a friend of the business. He's the head of global media at Uber. Travis joined Uber in January of 2020. He leads their global media practice. That includes media buying, planning, agency management, and partnerships across all Uber brands globally. Travis joined from Vayner, Twitter prior, Dentsu prior to that, a really storied past. We're excited to have him here. And hosted by a dear friend of Brand Innovators, Davina Kent, the SVP of Client Partnerships at Ampersand, spending time at Comcast and TiVo prior, one of the true guardians of the advanced TV space. So we're excited to kick off this conversation. We'll give them the floor. Travis, Davina, looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Adam. Really appreciate it and excited to have Travis here today to talk to you guys about a lot of fun topics. So before we begin, just really quick about Ampersand. Ampersand's a TV and advertising and media technology company that's owned by the 3 largest TV distributors. And really our mission is to help advertisers find audiences where they want to reach on whatever content that they're consuming, TV content that they're consuming, and then measuring all the business outcomes that matter to them to drive their business. So without further ado, Travis, we're here to hear from you. You've been doing some really cool things at Uber. I've been really excited to see a lot of the marketing efforts during this time. And I know you just started at Uber in January, and kind of a crazy time to start a new role. You want to talk a little bit about how it's been just coming into the role? I feel like you're already making such a big impact, so would love to hear how it's going.
Yeah, no, and hi, Davina. Good to see you. Last time I saw you, I feel like it was much darker because it was so early for you on the West Coast. So
I'm much like
I know,
yeah.
shading the color blue on your walls. It's popping. It's nice. Yeah, so I started, like you said, in January, and I probably had about two solid weeks in the office before everything kind of started to go downhill, and my life shifted to 100% Zoom, and I left New York and I'm down here in South Carolina where I grew up. Living in my childhood bedroom, so like living the dream. And
it could be good or bad. I don't
know. It's like when I want to eat like really good food, but like when I want like to actually be an adult, like I have been for most of my life, then it gets a little awkward. And then also Uber announced, I think last week, that our offices are closed until July 2021. So now I'm like, okay, this is another year. But yeah, so it's been interesting because there's only one person on my entire team who I've ever met in person. Every single person on my team around the globe, I've only ever had Zooms with. I play this game in my head of, like how tall is everyone? Because it's just something you never think about. But now I'm like, are they 4'8"? Are they 7'2"? I have no idea. Like, I can't wait to like see people in person to like actually know how tall they are. But yeah, no, it's been interesting. It's been challenging, but I think it's also been a really good opportunity too, because there's good and bad about working from home all the time. And I find that I've never worked harder in my life than I am right now, which is a whole other issue that I have to start to get a better balance. But it has allowed for me to really focus, and especially as my team is new, as our organization structure is new, as our global framework is new, it has really given me the opportunity to just kind of like focus and really set some operational changes across the team and across the org before we really do start to run. So it's been a challenge. I've enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next 12 months. I feel like if I reinforce the positivity, it will come to fruition, right? And it actually will be good not to be in the office for a year.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously with the times in the Zoom, I'm usually on a plane half the time, and I've had so much time just actually getting to know people, ironically, because I'm on video with them versus in an airport on my cell phone talking to people. So it's been great. Look, Uber, as we know, has gone through a lot of change over the last few years, and so you come in addition to everything going on with current events, into the organization at a unique time, and the impact that you're already making in such a short time, I feel like is in a positive way has been great. Can you talk a little bit about, you have a big agency background, right? And there's a lot. Everyone on the agency side wants to be on the client side, right? And so you made it. You're on the client side. Can you talk a little bit about how your agency background has contributed to your role, and then is it all cracked up to what everyone expects being the client on the client side? So a little bit about that would be great.
Yeah. So I think the good thing about being and growing up basically on the agency side is you just learn how to be super nimble and super reactive, right? Like there's that fine balance of, I grew up mostly on CPG. So, I was planning, 2 years out, like kind of like getting my tactical plans done. But then there were always changes that were going to happen, right? So it's just like, you would get to launching in a couple months, you'd always have to redo full plans, partial plans, whatever. So there was always that good balance that you learned around like structure and long-term planning, but also making sure that you're able to be nimble and reactive and not afraid to change, and not, kind of like backing down on that. So I think that has helped me just, and I'm looking at this like more one-to-one versus my experience, is Uber, and I love Uber. Uber is not, the CPGs of the world that are doing 12-month, 24-month planning. I think that we were kidding around before when we were talking, is like, I still don't have my full H2 budgets, which is like, we're like into H2 now. So this is like completely opposite from what I used to. So I think it has given me the ability to be able to take some of the structure and kind of align with as much structure as we can while still being flexible and still being nimble. We're doing plans, like 2 months out now, which again is just like, it's not the best, but it's also, I think it's worked well in this time too, because every single month is changing. And what we're doing in the US right now is completely different than what's going on in, North Asia, where it's getting back to be a bit of new normal, versus what's going on in Brazil, which is very similar to us, which is where Europe, which is kind of in between. So I think as much as I would love for more long-term kind of focus and structure and operational rigor, I think it's actually behooved us not to have that here. And then on your other question about like, is it all, what it's cracked up to be? And I always apologize to my friends who have grown up on the brand side, but in my head, I always kind of picture it as like, that's where you go to coast. That's where, it's easier there. You have partners who are kind of helping you do all of your stuff. It's not that at all. Like I said, I've been working more now than I've ever worked in the past. I don't think I really understood like all the internal relationships that are needed on the brand side, especially in a centralized role like media. where you're partnering with the marketing team, you're partnering with the brand team, you're partnering with the analytics and the insights team. You're partnering with, all of your agency partners. Like, you just have so many more partners that you're responsible for, that you're almost the Sherpa of, and it's not political by any means, but the soft skills, I think, become much more prevalent in the brand side than the agency side. So I don't think one is better than the other. Actually, I think they both have their pros and cons, and I've enjoyed both sides so far.
Well, I think it's a great round out for your experience and career path, so it's great. I would, I think too, I find it really interesting because just Uber being a tech company and being more of a reactive state and not like, your established, CPG brands or whatever that are more planning future out, that's almost been a perfect storm for you coming into this environment, right? Because I've talked to other advertisers that are having to make that shift from being in that structure and having to take their organization and turn creative around in 8 weeks or whatever it is. So, you guys have Uber's never really even participated in that front. So can you talk a little bit about, flexibility and the nimble, like what kind of things have been working for you? You've got a lot of new creative out there. What's been working, and how have you embraced that kind of quick turn on things? And how are you, any thoughts on the upfront and the changes going on there? I know it's kind of coming to a close, but I think it's a very different upfront than it has been. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one constant for us has always been, demand, which is both on, the earner side as well as, either the eater or the writer side. And the good thing about that for us is like that takes care of itself from an always on, performance media side of things. So, it's funny, I would say like maybe 3 years ago, we were predominantly a performance media brand, and that's where most of our dollars were going. Now we've actually made a big pivot where our brand dollars are actually, overcoming actually our performance dollars now. So that's also been kind of a big pivot here. So I think the ability for us to always be able to drive demand across everything that we're doing from like that performance side of things, that still kind of stays true. I think what is nuanced for us that becomes like completely different is what is the upper funnel storytelling that we're actually trying to do. So, last year it was really about being, transparent, whenever we came out with our safety report and trying to make sure that people knew what was going on, pushing us into favorability. And then now it's really about safety. So I think that's been the good thing about us not participating in the upfronts, because we don't necessarily know what our brand story or our brand narrative needs to be, because we are such a volatile company. But then the performance is what will kind of capture everything always on. So I think that's, and it allows for us to like also as an infant company, right, in the grand scheme of things, our consumer is completely changing. Like every single day, we have a really different understanding of who our consumer is and who we actually should be going after. So whenever we get into this moment of, again, me coming from like, mostly food and bev on the CPG side, I always knew it was moms, 25 to 54, and where I was going to find them really wasn't going to change. So participating in an upfront made total sense. We've actually changed our demo and our target probably 4 times on the Uber Eats side of things since I've got here because of the trajectory of the business. So it also just allows for us flexibility because we're very much so an audience first approach to how we're doing everything, and as much segmentation and as much kind of honing in as we can.
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys are have some of the richest first-party data in the world, and valuable first-party data, and sounds like you've got a group internally, Bullseye, that helps with the audience strategy and everything. How do you, because you've got, Uber used to be really heavy rides focused, and now you guys have really been also Uber Eats, especially during this time that business has done really well. So you're having to find a lot of different audiences. Can you talk about the different audiences and approach you take with supporting both businesses?
Yeah, and you're right. Like it's funny because, the tech companies I've worked with in the past have been very precious with their data, right? And they've kind of really internalized it. While we protect our data at all costs. Everything is always PII compliant, but there's only so much that only we can do with our data, versus ensuring that we're working with our partners as well to look at our data. How does their third party enrich our 1P? How does our 1P enrich their 3P? Group M, who's our North American, agency, how does our data actually import into their planning tools so they're actually planning against real human beings instead of survey-based, kind of stuff that they've been doing in the past. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, what from a TV standpoint and from a ride standpoint, our targeting is actually quite broad right now, because really the narrative right now is all about safety. And it's about, like when you're ready to move again, we're here and we're ready for you. But that is very, very macro, right? And it's not really specifically tied back to a need state of very specific individual human beings. Versus on the eat side of things, like we have so much data about them. We know what type of food they like. We know where they live. We know like what, average wait times are, for certain restaurants in their area. So what we're able to do is we're really able to slice all of those different people apart from each other, really understand all of their different need states, making sure that we have creative that's actually going to speak to them based upon what they need as a human being, that they look at that, they feel it's relevant, they feel it represents them, and we know that they're going to convert a lot more easily. And also just ensuring that the data is not only living in a performance world, but ensuring that we're partnering people, like with y'all or like, with people in digital out of home, where we're able to look via, like a live ramp and looking at how we're ingesting our 1P out, like from that out of home digital ad exposure, right? We're able to track that all the way down to conversion. So how do we actually just get smarter with our data as well, ensuring that not only we're more effective through the targeting and the content that we're serving them, but we're also more efficient, right? Because we're able to actually track everything from at the very, very top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom.
Well, I know, that's the cool thing, right? It used to, and I guess being a tech company, that's kind of what's probably had them so lower funnel focus, is because data only existed for the last click, and that's changed now. But I loved what when you and I talked, I loved what you talked about, like the old media is the cool media now, right? You want to talk a little bit about the old media? I mean, you kind of talked about it a little bit, but it's old media is now measurable, right? I mean, that's
measurable and like at times more effective, and which I'm sure half of all my bosses, hear that and they're like, "What are you talking?" Like, because I grew up born and bred digital, right? Like, even when I started this full, and I had my first meeting with MediaCom here in the US, I was like, y'all are going to have to tell me how to buy out of home. Like, I've never bought a billboard in my life, because that just wasn't my background. It was entirely digital. So I was definitely very skeptical of offline or kind of traditional, because I was like, to your point, I was just like, well, you can't measure it, right? Well, the MMMs are just going to always say that they're working, because the MMMs were built, in order to favor anything that's kind of mass like that. So I came in with a very kind of preconceived notion about what offline was able to do versus what online was able to do. We've very quickly seen through a lot of our survey data, brand lift data, kind of cross-channel brand lift studies that we've been doing, that especially for us right now, through the lens that we need to tell a story, the best place to do that are in places like TV, out of home, and radio. There's so much clutter in digital, right? And I think that digital has its place for so many things. But whenever you're really trying to tell a longer story that isn't just like trying to get people to convert in that very particular moment, hard to break through on mobile and social. So I think that's why it's so cool for us. And the fact that we can actually, like we were talking about before, you can measure all the way through the funnel from digital out of home. We're looking at like really cool, kind of like causal or incrementality from TV, through like, brands like I Spy, to look at things like holistically like that. We didn't have that, a couple of years ago. So now I think we're able to measure offline the same way that we have been able to measure online in the past. And we're actually, while it is sometimes more expensive, we're actually getting a higher ROI, because the effectiveness and the storytelling is much more powerful there than maybe some of the online platforms.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting because you guys, you are like, your DNA is in the is grounded in audience space, whereas a lot of other marketers that's a new thing for them, the shift from Nielsen to audiences. And then, being able, at Ampersand, we're trying to, we call it moving TV forward, which is kind of right in that, which is finding allowing advertisers to find audiences no matter where they're viewing TV content, and then being able to measure all that. But let's talk a little bit about something that I know near and dear to your heart, and I think definitely contributing to the success that Uber's having in terms of your brand metrics, which is around brand purpose. Do you want to talk a little bit about brand purpose and your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this in the sense that, like, I think this year, as insane and as crazy as it's been, I think if anything, it's just shown that brands have the authority to take a stance, and brands have the authority to take a position, and consumers are actually looking for that. They're looking for brands to take a position. They're looking for brands to educate them. They're looking for brands to support what they deem to be right and correct. So Uber operates very well in crisis, is what I found, and that's when we can actually mobilize really, really quickly. And I think in the past we've tried to move towards this notion of, like, what does a master brand stand for? But we just haven't been able to, because we haven't been pushed in that direction, because Eats was over here, Rides was over here. They were operating in their own silos. We didn't really understand the audience overlay, because we were just operating them differently. But what we've done now, especially in a moment when our Rides business is obviously down, we've taken this moment to take a stance. And back in April, we were one of the first brands. We came out with a pretty heavy weight in TV of a spot that said, "Thank you for not riding." So, like, we are the mobility company that moves people, and we are telling you, don't move. Like, let the frontline workers, let the people who actually need to move, and don't allow for the spread of this to happen. Whenever the whole mask debate started, we were when the first came out, but even before the retailers is saying, like, no mask, no ride. Like, we are in a position to protect you as a rider, and more importantly, like, or just as importantly, like, our earners, right, who actually are having to get out there every single day and still, work. Like, how do we ensure that everyone is protected, and we're ensuring that all of that is happening? So it's been really refreshing that we've been able to take this, and we've actually seen, by taking stances like that, a lot of our scores, especially on a brand lift side of things, and favorability is usually what we measure as, like, our major KPI, especially on the ride side. Eats is a little bit different. It's usually more about consideration. But it's gone through the roof, right? So it's increased higher than it has, in the past couple of years. And a lot of the qualitative stuff that we're seeing is, like, people are just kind of thankful for us, not politicizing things, just saying what we think, and doing what's right. Like, we had an internal meeting, and one of the execs, was looking at, this chart of just, like, like, the rides revenue obviously was down, and it was kind of, like, coming down at an incremental rate. But then, like, there was this comment that everyone just embraced of just, like, this sucks for us, like, but how amazing is this for humanity? Like, how good is it that people are actually staying home, and they're actually doing what's right and not spreading this? So, you have those moments, and I think that that's what's really important for me. I'm pushing our organization, and I think all organizations, we have a really, I think we're privileged in the sense to work in the industry that we do, to have the voice that we do and the platform that we do. And if you're not standing for something, and if you're not making purpose out of your brand, then it's hard for me to understand, like, what are you really doing, as a brand, especially as younger consumers and Gen Z and the TikTok generation demand it more than anyone else has ever, and they are soon to become, a hugely spending generation that we need to ensure that we're making sure that we're not only speaking to our older customers, but also our younger ones too.
Well, and you've had to have buy-in from your management, right? Because that approach, that brand purpose approach, is very much like, you're in it for the long haul, right? That is not a performance driving strategy, right? I'm sure you have other performance driving strategies, but you're looking 2 years out at how you change the brand and the perception of the brand. How have you gotten that buy-in from, especially during this time when people are looking at the bottom line and you're in meetings like that about revenue and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it starts at the top, right? And I think that my boss, Thomas Renice, who had come over, I came in January, he came over in September. He was the CMO at Google Hardware for, I think like 10 years. The first campaign that he went to Dara, our CEO, with was this thank you writers, right? For thank you for not writing. He's just like, so I was a little freaked out about going to the CEO, and being like, so got a great idea. I think we should put out a spot and tell people don't use our product, right? And I'm just like, oh my God. But then like you realize like Dara is just like, yeah, like that's the right thing to do. And I think that's what's been really refreshing for me coming into Uber, because I didn't have that same perception of Uber before I came in. I don't know if I had the most positive kind of correlation with the Uber brand based upon what I as a consumer had seen before I started. Once I got here, that's when I just realized that, we just kind of get in our own way and we're not always really telling these like really cool and impactful things that we're doing around the world. We have agendas and like partnerships to like stop human trafficking, to feed, like all the frontline workers, to give them free rides, like to empower, our earners for insurance and education. Like, it's just like, there's so much good work that's being done that they're actually not doing it. I think this was just, again, one of those moments that we're like, you know what, F it. Like, crisis brings out the best in us. Let's use this momentum. And it was positioned through that lens too. And it's a good point that it's like, you're not going to see the near-term impact of this. Like, this is not going to drive the business in H1. This is not going to drive the business in H2. This is looking at 2022 out. But this is going to be what allows for the brand to survive, because it's not that bottom funnel just transacting on there at the bottom all day.
Yeah, definitely. So we got a lot of questions coming in for you. So I thought I would, but one I think which ties to this, right? Which is you've got this brand purpose, mission, right? Storytelling, but you got to be nimble. How are you handling content, cranking out different content and that sort of thing? And maybe tie in, we didn't talk about your agency partners, but you've been doing a lot of work there, and I know they're really important to you. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, even when I came, so when I first came in, we work with a lot of agencies. And I think that was kind of a point of the past, because, when Uber started, it was hyper local. So it's not like we didn't even have just country general managers. We have city general managers who controlled their budget, controlled their agencies. They did whatever they wanted to do. And I think that's a big reason why we were so successful, is because we know the local market better than anyone, because that's where we grew out of. But now we are at a scale, right, that we have to really pivot to a global first organization while those people on the ground are really understanding what those nuances are. So one thing that, I came in, like, even in the US, I forget how many media agencies we had, but it was way too many. We had one for digital, one for, local TV, one for radio, one for out of home, one for, TV, who's also doing planning. I'm just like, this is crazy. We're a tech company. Like, we don't need like tons of different, sources of data. We have the data. We need for one person to be doing this. So, we consolidate everything in North America with Mediacom, and they've been an awesome partner, and really starting to shift to really understanding, like, what are the channels that are right now versus what are the channels that are going to be right, kind of in 2 years. And then on the creative side, it's the same thing. It's, a lot of our ideas are starting from a media first standpoint, and we're backing into what our creative needs to be, and then also vice versa. But we're not only starting with these like big anthem spots like we have been in the past. It's like, cool, that might be our creative container, but underneath that, we're going to create thousands of pieces of content. We're going to be leaning into DCO. We're going to be leaning into things like director's mix. we're going to be leaning into like at least identifying what are our 10 local markets that we need to go heavy on and kind of do like local TV instead of national TV with very relevant, TVCs for that market. And we're just pushing them. And I think it's been interesting to watch, and I'm not a creative person, but like even watching the production side of the house, like sprint faster than they've ever sprinted too, which is like, it's almost an opposite for me, right? Because you think it's like you can't really do production the way they used to could. You can't have all these people together. There's no more craft services. But they are just like cranking out spots in like 24 hours because they're having to. So it's about the right person, the right place, the right time. And we're just trying to at least align all of our creative, at least to the media plan beyond, the Anthem TVC, which I think is what we really did in the past.
Well, you have a really awesome agency roster anyways. I loved White and Kennedy, and obviously MediaCom is great too. So the other question too is just around cost reduction, right? So, with rides down, you obviously, we still need to have a look at the P&L. What are the things you're doing to save costs, but also be able to be out there proactively with these new initiatives?
Yeah. So, I mean, the good thing is like, obviously as the rides business has declined, the eats business has been just growing exponentially. I think we had our earnings, was it last week or the week before? But obviously our eats business is not made up for the rides business. But moving forward, Dara basically said it will be a 50-50 split. When things get back to normal, this is our new normal. It's not the old way. It is just ensuring that like eats and rides, or as we've now shifted into, mobility and delivery is kind of our new kind of anchor products. It's really about that. And I think what's happened on the previously known as eats, now as delivery, is we're really starting to understand like and how to diversify that entire portfolio, ensuring that we're not only increasing the food delivery business, but ensuring that we're able to attach ourselves to other types of delivery that we've just found that consumers need. So, we had the corner shop acquisition from Latin America that we piloted now, I think in Dallas and Miami and all of Canada, which is partnering with the supermarkets to do proper food delivery. We're going to be doing pharmaceutical delivery, in partnership with different drugstores. We have the Postmates acquisition as well, which when you think about just like their technology that they've built as a means for delivery, and because when they first started, they weren't just about food delivery, they were about delivery as a macro. So that's really our purpose moving forward, is like, how do you move what's important? Whether moving is a human being, whether moving is food delivery, whether moving is grocery, whether moving is pharma, whether moving is literally it's your birthday and I want to call, a bakery and have that bakery deliver that cake to you, right? You can do all of that through Uber, and it all becomes a singular source of truth that you're able to do that. So I think it's like, are we going to make up for the lost revenue, on the ride side of the business in, the next couple of months? No. Are we going to put ourselves in such a stronger position coming out of this than we were when we went into it? Absolutely. Through the diversification that we're doing.
I love that. I mean, so what I'm hearing is that instead of just focusing on cost reduction, you're doubling down. You're like, what acquisitions can we make during this time? How do we grow the other services that we can bring, broaden our approach to delivery and mobility to drive up revenue so that you guys are really going to be well positioned when we come out of this, right?
And I also think on the media side, like, I don't, efficiencies aren't the most important thing for me. Like I'm willing to pay more for media all day long as long as I know that it's going to be more impactful. So like the simple equation, right, of effectiveness over efficiency, what's your ROI? My ROI continues to increase. I'll pay triple, right? Like for the media, if I know that that effectiveness lever is going to be the one that is actually driving a higher ROI. So we're not in the world where we're like, well, we have to cut, like because we have a limited budget, we need to cut out some of our higher, like the CPMs that might be higher than the others. It's like maybe actually we need to cut out some of this really long tail stuff that was much more driven on kind of the importance of what's going on from the top all the way pushing down the bottom, because that's where our effectiveness. So it's like we have to think about like the effectiveness lever versus the efficiency lever too whenever we're looking at cost implications.
Well, and so that foots to another question nicely, which is, and you and I talked about this on our prep call, which is the balance of effectiveness and efficiency with emerging media, right? Where the reach may not be as big, but growing and important. And the question was specifically around, people working from home, their consumer media habits have changed, the CTV, and I know, so can you talk a little bit about how you're measuring effectiveness and efficiency for some of those emerging medias, like CTV and
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, ideally, whenever we're going into some of these tests, especially, with CTV or any sort of like emerging media, we still do like to have measurement. So, the measurement doesn't have to be as robust as maybe kind of more, legacy media, but we still need to have some sort of direction. And really that's it. I mean, it's like, we talked about it in the beginning of having flexibility, where we're first and foremost, we do audience planning. So if we're starting to see that our audiences are spending, a lot more time on, like CTV versus they are on linear, then that actually makes a lot more sense. And we're willing to pay a bit more of a premium there in order to reach that person at the right time with the right message, right? And actually kind of drive that purpose. So yeah, I mean, I think, there's the whole myth of like, the 70-20-10, rule. We don't really prescribe to that. If 70% of our media was technically emerging media, I would be okay with that, as long as I knew and I was able to understand that my audience was actually consuming more media on those channels than other channels. And I was at least able to get a directional read on what lifts look like. And for me, especially from a brand standpoint, it's really about brand lift. And if they can do it, how do we ensure that other third parties can? So can like a Millward Brown Kantar come in? Can a Nielsen come in? Can like someone who can do proper cross-channel brand lift studies come in and help us understand that? And then that's it. So we definitely want to pivot based on where our audience is consuming media.
Well, our focus, like from our perspective, it's all TV, right? Regardless of how that consumer is consuming it. And, the effectiveness really comes into play. I mean, we're trying to remove the silos, right? If you have silos and you just look in isolation at one platform versus another, your measurement's it's gonna be out of whack. It's not gonna be, but if you can look holistically at your TV investment and look at, linear TV and streaming TV and all the flavors of that, I think your outcomes or your measurement could be much more positive. Let's see, podcasting. So I know you talked about old media and radio. There's a question about, can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with podcasts? I know we talked about, I enjoyed listening to my podcast while I was on my road trip recently. So a little bit about that.
We are obsessed with podcasts right now and streaming audio as a whole, right? Which is inclusive of podcasts for us. So we started to test it last year. And this is when you talk about, kind of like testing and learning, and we always put enough in there to get enough reads. And we were starting to see, like, especially whenever we would do brand lift studies, whether it be through Servata or whomever we were doing it, that streaming audio was always an outlier in a really good way. So we might be like lifting 2 to 3 points across other channels, but streaming audio is like 15, 16 points, versus, and we're like, what? That can't be right, so we would do it again. We would start to see similar stuff. So as of now, streaming audio is by far our top performing channel, without question, when it comes to actually increasing overarching brand metrics. So we're very bullish on podcast and kind of streaming audio as a whole. And I think it really makes sense too. Like for me, like I don't always have the opportunity to listen to podcasts when I'm in the office, but now if I'm working, I just have a podcast playing, right? I don't necessarily have to have my earphones on. Or now that people are just trying to get in their cars and just try to move and just not be at home, and they're taking road trips, like there is a lot more opportunity for people to be leaned into this type of media, and it's working super well for us. I love it.
Well, another example of old media that's measurable now as well, right? Which is good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there's another question. You mentioned TikTok, and so anything about social and how social factors in to your strategy, any POV and all the stuff around TikTok?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for us, in general is, we are a very brand safe brand. And we take brand safety extremely important. So, I think regardless of the platform, what we always do is we always just try to push the platforms to ensure they are adhering to the brand safety rigors that we need, right? And a lot of that has to do with adjacency controls. And if brands aren't able to really abide by that and kind of control where our content is shown and kind of the adjacency factor there, then we are usually quite hesitant in order to enter that arena. It doesn't mean that we're hesitant to enter there maybe an organic standpoint or like from an influencer standpoint in order for other people to tell our story. But I think that whether it's TikTok, whether it's any kind of emerging digital platform, the first thing that we always look at it through is a lens of brand safety. If it can check all the marks on that, awesome, we will go all in. If it can't, we will continue to push them to ensure that our brand can kind of show up in a brand safe environment that isn't detrimental to our brand, especially our brand, because we have been on such a journey. And we are really, putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to, not only brand safety, but like physical safety and human safety. And how does that actually correlate across everything that we're doing?
Well, I love everything you're doing. Keep it up. I appreciate the partnership. I look forward to working more with you, especially this whole expansion of delivery and mobility. So thanks for the time. And I think David's joining us now. So I was able to get through all the questions. You had a lot of questions. So
that was phenomenal. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Davina, for kicking us off today. Really appreciate you having you both of you here. And I feel like it's a recurring conversation these days. So we really appreciate your time, and we look forward to having you back again soon.
Great. Thanks, guys. Bye, Travis.
We've got two more fantastic discussions today. And as I noted earlier, it's not too late to invite any friends or colleagues, so you can feel free to send them the link. That conversation with Travis and Davina will be on our on-demand section shortly, so you can check that out as well. But we're going to be joined by our next speaker. So we have Jason Wilson, the Director of Marketing for Overstock.com. Jason oversees the social media team and the programmatic display advertising efforts, and has also been heavily involved in the development of their incremental testing methodology to show the value of social advertising. So we're going to welcome Jason and Ken Mallon, his moderator from Samba TV. So Jason and Ken, welcome to the virtual stage.
Hello, good to be here.
Welcome, Jason. Good to have you. How's it going?
Fantastic.
Well, and Ken, thank you for being here. How are you, Ken? Oh, we can't hear you, Ken. We're not getting your audio. It might be the headset.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. All right. Well, I will turn the virtual floor over to you guys, and that's my cue to bow out. So, Ken, it's all yours.
Hey, great. Thanks a lot. It's a lot of fun to be here and looking forward to getting into it with Jason Wilson, Director of Marketing at Overstock. Jason, you want to just kick it off by telling us a little bit about your role and what you do over there at Overstock?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So right now I oversee a couple of different teams. I oversee our programmatic display team, which handles, like I said, the programmatic media as well as like our retargeting efforts. And then I also oversee our paid social and our organic social teams. And as of about a week ago, I now am overseeing our brand team as well. So they handle all of our kind of television and digital video and direct mail and so forth. So I'm excited to kind of get my feet wet on that one as well.
Hey, and congratulations on the new role. I think it sounds like a lot of stuff. Speaking of a lot of stuff, this job title, marketing director, kind of varies a lot at different people. What sort of would be surprising to someone about something that you partake in this role at Overstock that might be different?
Interesting question. So I think maybe my mother would disagree, but I'm not sure that I'm all that special or all that different. I think that we certainly my role, and I think as marketers, I think a lot of the challenges are all going to be the same, right? So I think we're all kind of looking for a way to make sure that we are kind of top of mind for our customers, making sure that we are running efficient media, and that when they're looking specifically for Overstock, when they're looking for ways to kind of home goods or improve their home or kind of do some redesign, that Overstock is top of mind for that. I will say that in terms of kind of something that might be specific to Overstock or special, I think the fact that we are a pure play e-commerce, right? We don't have any brick and mortar stores. We don't have any physical location, right? We have to I think we have to go a little bit more sort of above and beyond in terms of like creating that customer experience, because we have to do so digitally. And so I think we do a tremendous job at that. I think that, but it's something that we're always trying to innovate in, is something that's always top of mind for us.
Yeah, being a pure play sure has come in handy during the pandemic, I'll bet. So let's get into the pandemic a little bit. Obviously, it's top of mind these days for everybody. First, just, help us understand a little bit what items were kind of flying off the virtual shelves early in the pandemic.
Yeah, so I think it's things that you might assume or that you might expect, right? I think early on we were seeing a lot of sort of office furniture and desks and cabinets and those sorts of things. But I think we have, as kind of the COVID has sort of, or the pandemic has kind of, I guess, come in full force, for lack of a better term, we are starting to see things shift sort of back to normal, but also just at a exponential rate, right? So, for instance, like I said, we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, office furniture, a lot of work from home. Homes had to be the office. Now they also have to be a school and a playground and, so many other different things. And so we're seeing kind of that shift to sort of normal seasonality, right? Patio furniture, above ground pools, swing sets, those sorts of things. And now as we're kind of approaching a very sort of non-typical, I'll say, back to school time, we're also seeing a lot of those things come through as well.
Hey, quick reminder to our audience is we are going to take Q&A at the end. So go ahead, submit your questions either about Overstock, or if you have questions about Samba TV and our ACR-based viewership and ad exposure data, go ahead and submit your questions. We'll get to them at the end. Now back to the pandemic. How'd you like that little 15-second commercial there? It was pretty smooth,
nice, well done.
All right. So you talked about shifting strategy. So it sounds like early on, okay, people are trying to set up their homes. They're trying to get ready for this pandemic. But now you're saying it's kind of moved toward, maybe a little bit of normalcy. So what kinds of other consumer behaviors have you seen, and how have you adapted to it from a marketing standpoint?
So I think I think so much of the home goods market is now moving online. I think I heard some time ago there's something like the home goods market about it was in the teens in terms of how much of it was online, right? So kind of low double digits, and now it's like upwards of 30%. And so we have seen sort of that shift, as you kind of mentioned early on, right? Being a pure play e-commerce we are kind of uniquely positioned to sort of weather that type of storm. And so I think that rising tide has been helpful in our business. But I think there hasn't necessarily been a tectonic shift in terms of adaptation to these types of circumstances. I think earlier on, kind of in the year before any of the pandemic, there was a strong focus internally to kind of get back to basics, like be strategic with our initiatives and those sorts of things, and resource them properly. And I think that just set us up really well to kind of weather that type of storm.
Yeah, so COVID has caused us, right, to change in ways we live, work, market. Now you say some of them aren't tectonic. My question for you is, which of them do you think are going to kind of end up being permanent? You mentioned the home goods kind of shifting in terms of the increase in terms of online purchasing. Do you think that's just going to sustain? And what other things do you think have kind of changed during this that are going to be sustained?
Yeah, so I think specifically for Overstock, right? Like early on, we were looking for ways that we can help kind of ease the burden for our consumer and help kind of increase the convenience of our offering. And one of the, I think the main way that we did that was kind of offer free shipping on everything, right? We used to have kind of free shipping on over a certain price point, and then we just sort of said, okay, across the board, free shipping on everything, and again to sort of increase that convenience factor. I think that is something that we have we've decided to kind of to have that be prolonged, right, as kind of a bulwark, right, in terms of our offering. And so I think that will certainly stay. I think those types of things, as we look and innovate and try to focus on our customer, I think we're developing interesting things that there's no real reason for them to kind of go away, right? Like convenience is always king when you're dealing with the customer experience. And so, and then I would say that internally, I think there is a you know, I don't have a crystal ball, certainly, but I think that there was, if I may be so bold, I think our leadership was sort of impressed with the way that everyone sort of pivoted quickly and adapt to these changing circumstances, and things like work from home, right, which were, I would be interested to see if something like that gets prolonged, right? Like, I think that we shifted as a company very quickly and kind of didn't really miss a beat. And so I think that there's kind of ideas like that I think, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I would be interested to see if they persist. Yeah,
so it seems like this could influence product, it could influence messaging, it could influence positioning. And some of these seem like they're temporary, some are permanent. Any other thoughts about these things and how it really has affected marketing for Overstock? And also, how do you think people should think about permanent potential changes just in general from a marketing standpoint?
Yeah, so I think a couple of different thoughts on that. So I think there's the old quote by Lenin that is, well, the Russian, not the Beatle, that is, you know, that there's sometimes decades where nothing happens, and then there's weeks where decades happen, right? And I think we're in that kind of position where, you know, this has become sort of an accelerant, right, to some of the strategies and plans that we had, right? More so than sort of a change agent. And so I think what's interesting with that perspective is, you know, we sort of hold to, I would say, at least two main tenets, right? One is that we always want to sort of keep our ear to the street and look for new opportunities, look for new methodologies, new technologies, new platforms, and so forth. And we love testing and failing fast. I think that's kind of a tenet in terms of like how we're approaching different types of adaptability in terms of advertising. So I think that's kind of tenet number one is looking for opportunities and keeping our ear to the street. And I think tenet number two is sort of a counterbalance to that is making sure that we're not losing sight of fundamentals. And so, for instance, like you can't be all sizzle and no steak, right? And so I think that we are looking at things like ROAS, like media modeling, to understand kind of the contribution efforts of our marketing and how that drives business goals.
Yeah, so, you know, Sama's in the TV data business, so I got to ask you, how are you using TV data and or TV and other marketing channels right now that may have be different? You know, talk to me a little about your targeting and measurement approaches.
So yeah, so I think in targeting and measurement, right, on TV and other channels, I think what we're looking at is kind of the impact that it has to the customer journey, certainly, right? And so when we're talking about targeting and we're talking about measurement, what we're really looking to do is either kind of with targeting is be efficient and personalization and so forth, or personalized. And then with in terms of measurement, you're looking, like I said, the impact of the customer journey. And I think that again, we target so that we can become either more efficient or we can become more personalized, and sometimes those go hand in glove. But I think we are trying to approach this from targeting and measurement and kind of the balance between the two, and in two kind of distinct ways. I think number one, we're looking at like how to close the gap in terms of data gathering, analysis, insight, and so forth, and make that, you know, as seemingly instantaneous as we can from a sort of measurement perspective. And then from a targeting perspective is making sure that we have a good understanding of our customer, and that we're doing the research and the customer analysis necessary to kind of get a good perspective. I think we have done that, and we have kind of our two main cohorts that we focus on, and in ways that we can't personalize, like kind of broader media and so forth. We focus on those two cohorts, and then when we can, we make sure that we're personalizing, because I think that is sort of quickly becoming table stakes in terms of marketing and media.
So talk to me about measuring success. I'm guessing that in the e-commerce space, is it really as simple as just looking at view through to online transaction and maybe talking about how much you spent for that media and maybe some kind of ROI, like purchases per media dollar spent or something like that?
Yeah.
How does it work for you guys? And do you look at other things? Is branding important and so forth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say number one, I think branding is incredibly important, and I think that what's nice, I think, about the approach that we have at Overstock is that there's no sort of one size fits all in terms of kind of the channel distribution and how we're measuring it, and so there's not kind of a prescribed method that we have to apply to each channel, and so there's kind of the old proverb that, like, you can't really measure a fish on its ability to climb a tree, nor should you measure a monkey on its ability to breathe underwater, right? And so you have to make sure that you're properly matching up the kind of questions and the insights that you're looking for with kind of the focus and the purpose of kind of the marketing efforts, either within a channel or kind of holistically as a channel broadly. So we do things like multi-touch attribution, we do media mix modeling, we do A/B tests and incrementality and so forth. And so we try to take a holistic approach to how we're measuring the effectiveness and contribution of our media.
So you talk about MTA and incrementality and all this. What hole do you see in it? Is the multi-screen part? Is it being able to connect the dots? Is it getting the TV ad exposure? Like, what are some of the things that are some of the holes, if any, in those kind of systems for you today?
Yeah, I think I would say a little bit of all of those, right? I think it depends on the partner and so forth that we're using, and each of them have that kind of their own sort of secret sauce. And so I think that's why we make sure that we take a sort of weighted approach to all of those different methodologies. I think each of them have their kind of their pros and cons, and I think that they should be kind of analyzed and weighted appropriately. I think if you I think it's every marketer's dream, right, to have sort of one source of truth in terms of attribution or kind of efficiency of media. And I just think that I hope that one day we might get there. I just don't know if there's any one solution that is perfect. And so I think sort of trying to triangulate the real effectiveness of media through all of these different methodologies is, at least for now, the right approach.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a question from the Q&A. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right. This one I think is kind of about optimization. So when you do get data during campaigns, how quickly are you able to respond? Do you have some sort of real-time system? Do you think that's overkill? Do you do things weekly, or does it kind of depend on the campaign?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I hate to rely on this answer, but it depends, right? So I think we try to, again, match very specifically our methodologies for both our methodologies for kind of optimizations and measurement, as well as our methodologies for management, and make those specific to the powers and the kind of the special sauce, for lack of a better term, of that platform and that channel, and not try to, again, create some sort of one-size-fits-all strategy. And so I think that when we're looking at optimization, some platforms you can be in there and optimizing, hour by hour based on the feedback that you're getting within the platform. Others have kind of ML and AI and so forth that are doing that, and you don't want to disrupt those algorithms from kind of auto optimizing and so forth. So I think it depends from, strategy to strategy, from tactic to tactic, and platform to platform.
Yeah, another audience question from Greg has to do with digital versus traditional. I'm going to modify the question a little bit on the fly here because I think it's really about traditional versus emerging things. Talk to me a little bit about how you think about TV versus maybe CTV, podcasts, and I think in the previous call they talked a little bit about TikTok and some things like that. So can you comment on those and how Overstock thinks about some of the more emerging things that might be more difficult to measure, or you just don't have as much experience with in terms of reach, brand safety, and so forth?
Yeah, so I think that, I think those are, it's all comes down to like risk analysis, right? And so I think you have to look at opportunity by opportunity and look for, is the opportunity to arbitrage here worth the risk of kind of it not working out, or what you mentioned about like kind of brand safety guidelines, or maybe their technology isn't where it needs to be, or we can't get sort of the feedback loop that we have grown so accustomed to from other channels and so forth. And so I think we have to do that kind of risk analysis, and that's how we look at different opportunities. And I think that we kind of have, or at least I guess personally, I have sort of a approach that I like to look at in terms of these opportunities. And there's I grew up with like the 4 P's of marketing, right? Product, price, place, and promotion. And then what I like to look at sort of these opportunities in the lens of like the 4 I's, right? And I kind of break them down by like intent, identity, intelligence, and interest. And so almost universally, each of these new technologies and platforms and things that we're looking at, they usually fall into one of those 4 categories, right? They have some kind of specialty that foots to one of those 4 categories. So, either they have really strong identity data, right? They can personalize and kind of get to know the customer. They have really strong intent signals so that they can know sort of what problem the customer is trying to solve for, and we can tune our advertising accordingly. They have some sort of specialty in terms of interest, or like piquing the interest of the consumer, right? Driving sort of relevancy and so forth in terms of content. And then 4th, some kind of intelligence, right? Some sort of better mousetrap or machine learning and so forth to drive the other 3, right? Because if you don't have a way to automatically do the other 3, if you have to do them manually at scale, you're kind of sunk immediately. So those are the 4 areas that we really look for in terms of opportunity.
I see. So this is the first time hearing about the 4 I's. We should probably do an entire session just on that someday.
There you go.
And so just more specifically though, how is this impacting specifically like CTV or something like a TikTok? I mean, is Overstock looking at CTV, or like in terms of your budget, and where is it kind of distributed across media right now?
Yeah, so again, I think I can speak intelligently on kind of the purview and the teams that I sort of oversee. But I think, I think all of those are certainly on our radar, and we're analyzing those opportunities appropriately given that kind of framework. But I think some of the more nascent technology, there's the other, I feel like I'm mixing a lot of metaphors and analogies here, but there's the old adage of like the pioneers take the arrows, right? So like I think that you don't want to be too far out on the fringe, that you're kind of that your risk portfolio is tipped too much in one direction. But I think that there's certainly, as things start to emerge, you have to keep your ear to the street and make sure that you're getting in front of the customers where they're at. So that's kind of how we approach things.
Yeah. In terms of your competitors, like did the epidemic, the pandemic, change how you think about your competitors and any strategies that you might have along those lines? Or is it sort of, hey, we're all in this together and it doesn't really change the competitive dynamic?
I would say that I think it was sort of we were focusing on what at the task at hand, right? Like we wanted to focus on our business and what we're doing. And, certainly we do some kind of competitive analysis, but I think it's sticking to what we do best and our fundamentals and what makes our business strong. And like I mentioned, like the industry as a whole has certainly benefited from the both in the home goods industry and specifically the pure play e-commerce. We don't have kind of the overhead of a lot of physical locations like some of our competitors do. And so I think that's times like these that becomes an advantage. Prior, you can make a strong argument that might have been a disadvantage, right? And kind of flip. So, but yeah, I think in terms of our strategy, I don't think any kind of moves by our competitors don't have, like I mentioned, kind of any big tectonic shift in how we change our strategy.
I have heard that in some like critical times when there's a changing landscape, sometimes folks start to focus a little bit more on short term and also tend to focus a lot on their strengths. To what extent do you think Overstock sort of said, okay, we got to really hunker on what we're really good at to differentiate, and to what extent to just start to think, let's look at quarter two, let's look at the third quarter and spend a little bit less time thinking about Q4 or Q1 next year. Did that sort of happen? So it's kind of a two-part question in terms of strengths and then also about short versus long-term thinking.
Yeah, I think much to the credit of, I think there were some sort of short-term needs, I would say, right? In terms of like our supply chain, those sorts of things, right? Like you can, it really was like a stress test in terms of certain aspects of our business, like our supply chain and getting the things to the customers, getting the kind of purchase items to the customers in a timely manner, and who we were kind of relying on to do that. And I think that so that's one aspect. I think the other sort of aspect was, for instance, our customer service, right? Like our percent of customer service inquiries, I think stayed relatively flat, but the sheer volume, because we had so many sales, right? The percent of sales didn't really change. The percent of sales that needed a customer service contact didn't really change, but the sheer volume of totality of numbers that did. And so we needed to kind of answer that need. And I think what was really, at the risk of sounding a little sappy, I think what was really like heartwarming to me to see, it was like an all hands on deck approach to that and how we could kind of handle those sort of minor disruptions and how we could mitigate that. And, we had, all the way up to like VPs answering phones and like helping customers out. And it was a really kind of cool thing to see and be a part of. And so, I think that there was kind of some disruptions and some things that happened, but I think that we pivoted quickly to kind of answer those needs.
I see. So you realize the importance of customer service. And even though service increase as a percentage of sales stayed flat, just the sheer volume meant that there's this massive increase in people having questions, and folks just sort of probably took a quick training and just sort of jumped in and started answering emails or getting on phones or live chats or whatever mechanism you have to do that.
Yeah. And like I said, it was a really kind of cool thing to see that everyone kind of rolled up their sleeves and did the work that needed to be done. And I think that, again, that was sort of to answer kind of your previous question. That was kind of the short term, right? And that was the like, we need to get this job done and let's get it done and kind of move our business forward. And I think to very much the credit of our leadership, I think most of them have been, once we kind of got past those very kind of minor immediate disruptions, all the kind of thinking and planning and initiatives and so forth were all very long term. And how can we, how can we proper capitalize on this tremendous growth that we're doing and further set us up for growth in the future? And I think that we have developed a pretty comprehensive and unique strategy to do that.
Yeah, so we talked about short term, and one of the things that you mentioned was supply chain, and this is probably something you normally wouldn't have to think about that much, but maybe the pandemic caused disruption in certain products being available. Am I being accurate there? Is this something that you normally wouldn't have to think about? Then all of a sudden you say, well, shoot, I can't market this product because I don't want customers to be dissatisfied if there's a shortage and they come to the site and we say we're out of stock.
Yeah, certainly, and I don't want to, I think that certainly was part of it, and making sure that, for instance, we do. There's a certain amount of automation within a particular portion of our marketing, right? Where we have, if something within our, if something goes out of stock, we immediately kind of take down that product from being shown, or rather immediately being shown out in kind of any of our outbound advertising. And that happens, fairly quickly, and making sure that those systems are operating the way that they should, so that we're not just showing product that is not even available on our site anymore to our customers, right? And making sure that not only is that not a great customer experience, but making sure that it's not efficient media dollars either, right? And so making sure that all of those systems, and like I said, it was very much kind of a stress test through all the different aspects of our business. And I think obviously I'm tremendously biased, but I think we handled them quite extraordinary. So I think so I think again it was interesting to be a part of, and really kind of a cool thing to see.
There's a question we haven't talked about, but from my own experience, I saw that the pandemic enabled companies that maybe didn't work together or didn't partner together suddenly be eager to partner together. I don't know if there's an example for you, but to what extent did partnership dynamics change for you? And is there anything that you can share there about that?
Yeah, so I think any kind of broader partnership or kind of nothing immediately comes to mind, but I will say that we were fortunate again to start kind of the year in a place where we had really strong relationships with our partners, our suppliers. We call them and refer to them as partners because they truly are. And when sort of we started some of those products started to go out of stock and so forth, making sure to sort of shore up that feedback loop so that we can, in as quickly as possible, get them the data of the things that are selling so that they can make sure that they can either build or create or secure more product. And so I think that was, in terms of, there's no kind of overarching massive, brand partnership or something, but I think in a real way, we have kind of these, thousands of micro partnerships that we have with our suppliers that I think really, like I said, put us in a really good position to sort of weather that storm.
Question here from the audience about the online shopping experience, right? So what steps have you taken to make that, virtual experience good for customers? Did any of that change? I imagine there's not enough time to have that, shift or change, but maybe it did during the pandemic. But, what are some of the key principles that Overstock has in terms of how they want the online shopping experiences to be for your customers?
Yeah, so I will say that certainly I can speak more intelligently on some of our advertising and marketing efforts, as you can probably tell I'm a little bit out of my depth in terms of our supply chain and a little bit more and so forth on our kind of experience. But I will say that one thing that I think is really powerful is we never stop testing. We never complete the website and so forth and then just kind of wipe our hands and say okay, it's done, it's perfect. I think we have an army, a small army of engineers and developers and so forth that are constantly tweaking and improving and testing and so forth to make that customer experience better. And I think the other thing that bears mention is our mobile experience from our app to our kind of our mobile web experience. I think that's been a strong focus for us, certainly within the last year, and I would even say in the last few months is. Obviously the shift to mobile has been happening, the better part of the last decade, but I think that really kind of tuning up that experience and making it seamless for the user has been a strong focus for us as well.
Yeah. All right. So back to more like marketing strategy. You've obviously have had a ton of customers come through and purchase items on the site. And then when you're marketing, to what extent do you are you remarketing to them to come back and buy more versus new customer acquisition? And just say something about your mix and how the strategies differ both in terms of media channels, mostly in terms of media channels and targeting.
Yeah, so I think we have a good mix of both new customers, and certainly more recently with kind of COVID, and we saw tremendous new customer growth. And I think what we while it kind of varies between kind of half and half, over the past few years, now it is with this I'll say unprecedented kind of new customer growth. The question is, how do we retain them, and how do we give them a good experience and make sure that they keep coming back? And particularly when we have products that we're selling that have a much longer life cycle, right, than say a couple of weeks and so forth. And so sort of what adjacent product categories can we entice users to come back and purchase with us in? And so that's certainly something that's top of mind for us. I think in terms of retargeting and so forth, I think that is an efficient way to get that repeat customer, and I don't think that is a big portion of our strategy. But I don't think that. But I think there has to be a balance, and you don't want to. What's the old saying that's like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and I think in terms of business as well, it's an ounce of retention is worth a pound of new customers, right? And so you can't forget your current customers and the ones that you kind of dance with the one you came with a little bit.
And to that point, there's this huge opportunity, right? Because this influx of new customers during the pandemic, all of a sudden you've got a bunch of new emails. Mm-hmm. What do you do to retain them and continue a customer dialogue with them as the pandemic kind of wanes or becomes less top of mind in terms of like these critical panic items that people think they need to have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what is so sort of two thoughts on that. I think what's nice is that we continue to offer. We're not just one product category, right? We have several different offerings, and so right now it could be that you are trying to set up your home office, right? Or at least in the beginning of the pandemic, it may be that they're trying to set up their home office, and if we can give them an easy and convenient and positive experience and a great deal, then they're likely to come back. And so I think that that's half the battle. Then I think the other half is making sure that we're meeting them where they're at, right? And if they, like you mentioned, if they make a purchase, we have likely their email, and we can send them emails and coupons and those sorts of things and kind of updates on deals. But if that's not where they want to be, if that's not the method that they want to be or the channel that they want to be spoken to, then we need to find other ways to approach the customer and meet them where they're at. And so I think that's why having kind of a broad kind of marketing approach and reaching them in different channels, I think is appropriate.
The pandemic has brought some changes to some marketing things that have been around for a long time, like tent poles, like, back to school, Father's Day, graduations, all kinds of things that are really different now. I mean, what is back to school? Like, do you need backpacks anymore if you're just going to be at home? Lunches aren't being packed anymore. Even graduation was a really different experience, right? How, because there is this calendar, right? There's a tentpole calendar, and marketers look at it, and you probably have product rotations that are typical, summer holidays. Well, gosh, are people going out to the beach as much? Things are just different. How has sort of the notion of tent poles and seasonality played a role in a changing landscape for you as a marketer?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. I think that the overarching all of it is just it's really important to, as best you can, not to be tone deaf, right? And I think that recognizing that this isn't the same as last year and that these tentpole events can't be, and the way that you're messaging it and the imagery that you're using and so forth can't be the exact same. I think that making sure that you are kind of adapting appropriately, I think is kind of rule number one. I think for the most part, though, I think that some of them, some of these sort of tentpole events, kind of are stay tried and true, right? So for instance, back to school, right? A very different back to school this year than last year. But I think some of the like Memorial Day sale and Labor Day sale and those sorts of things is, are going to be a little bit more consistent. And I think that, but again, I think overarching all of it is just making sure that we're recognizing where people are at and kind of the situations and potential difficulties that they might be dealing with in our marketing and our messaging, and making sure that we're, like I said, just making a as convenient a possible experience for the customer.
I see. So you're saying, some of these things like back to school is still back to school, but maybe it's just a matter of different products being marketed, whereas it used to be, lunch containers and backpack. Maybe it's now getting a better desk or getting a laptop or, because I think with the pandemic, people say, hey, I need something that's going to last me a few weeks. I need something that's going to last me a month. I got a makeshift little desk here that I'm going to use. And then all of a sudden, this has got to be for 9 months or 12 months.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think, personally, I'm dealing with that as well. My children are going back to school and we're getting a laundry list of process and methodologies and regulations and so forth that we have to adhere by. And what's interesting is, that is different from district to district and state to state. And so like, how do we personalize and making sure that we are messaging to our consumers from a business perspective, the things that they need, and making sure that we're doing it in an appropriate manner. And so I think that is something that we're cognizant of and I think doing well at.
Yeah, I mean, you just touched on your personal life, and one of the things we've seen with Zoom calls and such is that all of a sudden we get to peer in each other's living rooms, and I know that it has triggered for me marketing thinking. It was a little bit different when I'm sitting with some of my customers and see how they live. To what extent has like your life patterns? You got kids going back to school. How does that influence your actual thinking? When you're in your day job and thinking about marketing, do you take into account what you're actually experiencing in the real world?
I would say most definitely, and I think that that's a really interesting question. I think that being again at the risk of sounding sappy and personal, like I think being around my family has made me a little bit potentially more empathetic to kind of the difficulties that people are facing and our customers are facing, and how can we, from a business perspective, and how can we approach those and answer those needs of the customer, because they're ever changing, right? Like it was home office and now it's swing sets, and now as we kind of are in full swing of summertime, how does the house and the yard become the playground, and frankly, how do I get the kids out of the house for a minute so I can have a Zoom call, and can they go play outside, and those sorts of things. And so I think that answering those kind of ever-changing needs, and now that we're in kind of back to school and those sorts of things, like how are we answering those needs in an empathetic and kind of relevant way?
Yeah, so being at home, peering into other people's living rooms, bedrooms, and kitchens all the time is triggering more empathy. And then you have social things going on, the Black Lives Matter, elections coming up, and some marketers have chosen to think a little bit about what's going on from a social standpoint and maybe tie more empathetic type messaging or even charitable type of messaging into some marketing. Is this, do you want to comment at all about Overstock or how this has like changed the way you think? It sounds like you're starting to like relate more and empathetic to buyers.
Yeah, certainly. I think that we, again, when COVID first happened, I think that there was, we needed to change our messaging. There wasn't just kind of, our messaging was never kind of deals, but it was, kind of how do you properly mix the kind of pushing kind of promotional and branding message and so forth. And I think we kind of had to go a little bit back to the drawing board to a certain extent when COVID happened, and making sure that like our messaging was more empathetic and less tone deaf. And when kind of the Black Lives Matter protests and those sorts of things, like making sure that we, as I kind of mentioned earlier, making sure we're kind of keeping our ear to the ground and making sure that we are giving the customer the proper message and experience that they're expecting. I think it, more broadly, no matter sort of what the kind of shift or kind of the no matter the sort of changing landscape that you're facing, I think if you kind of hold to those key principles, it helps kind of guide those decisions.
Hey, we're getting the 1-minute warning here. It's been great to talk to you. One last thing. I've been getting teased a little bit with a little bit of a beard here. Mine is actually a pre-COVID beard, but do you want to comment and just clear the air, because the questions have been massive coming in about beards, which I haven't been addressing, so I'm sorry to the audience, but we'll just finish up with beards.
Yeah, so no, mine was basically once I graduated high school and could actually grow a beard. I don't like the idea of shaving, and so I've had one ever since. So even in the picture, I guess, in the promotional, there's a beard. So that was all, those pictures were all pre-COVID.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Jason. It's been a real pleasure chatting, and I hope our audience enjoyed talking today. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, guys, thank you, Ken.
I mean, there's no better way to round out a session than with Beard Talk with Ken Mallon. I don't know if there is.
Well, you got to come clean with us right now yourself, Adam.
Look, it was a lot uglier than this until the roommate/wife decided we were going to go a different direction. So here we are. But amazing session, Ken. Great to see you, Jason. Fantastic session. Ken, I couldn't help but relate the intimacy of which we've all taken on by allowing people into our living rooms and home offices and kitchens and bedrooms. It has changed the perspective. I know I've been in that position, being on a call with someone who I've known a decade, and all of a sudden I'm in their living room. I mean, what an interesting change of course. And it's changed the entire way I think we do business. Jason, also, don't think you're going to get away with a Lenin drop. You did the Big Lebowski, Lenin, the Russian author, not John Lennon. Where
I almost started saying "Let It Be."
Where Walter in the bowling alley and Big Lebowski. Nice drop. But I have to, you mentioned it a few different times. You love testing and failing. I mean, I think that's sort of the armor of a marketer, right? That ability to say, this isn't a test and it was good or bad. It was a test. We learned something. I've said for years, we need to reposition even the word test into phases. Like, what is phase one of this learning cycle? What is the phase one of our learning agenda, our education path? How do I bring in great partners to help me test that and know that we're going to learn something and now apply to phase two? So I love that tone. So thanks to you both. Awesome session and great questions from the crowd. We're going to let you guys go. We're going to bring our next crew in. Thank you again, Jason and Ken. A quick reminder for everybody before we head into our last session, hashtag BI Livecast. Keep the dialogue going on all your platforms. We want to be sure we keep this conversation going, keep the dialogue alive. Excited to bring our last pair, our last duo up. Hannah Sun, Hamid Qayyum. Welcome. You'll join us here shortly. Hannah is the director of acquisition at Jibjab. She joined Jibjab in 2017 and is responsible for user acquisition across all products, strategy, channels, internally. She was at FTD. Great session with her wealth of experience. Moderated by head of digital services staff, marketing company, specializing in audience data, email services, digital display. Welcome to the stage, Hannah and Hamed, all yours.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. Yeah, so Hannah, we can't talk about beards, but I can talk about hair. This is my pre-COVID hair, so not sure if it's the same for you, but thanks for joining and being on the panel with me. Can you talk a little bit about what is Jibjab for those people who don't know, and what is your role at Jibjab?
Sure. So for those that don't know what Jibjab is, we are an e-card company at a high level. At a deeper level, we are a content site, right? We create really quality creative and videos that you can send to your family and your friends. And really, at the end of the day, our goal is to bring joy to as many people as possible, right? As the director of user acquisition at Jibjab, I have the, lucky position of being able to try to capture as many people, right? To get to know our product, use it, and, continue to spread joy. So definitely a great product, especially during COVID times, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah. So from what I remember before, you guys were heavy into political humor, and I remember, back in those days. So what made the company's impetus change from that over to, more of the current content that you're doing?
Sure. In a world where politics was kind of fun, right? You could poke fun at one side or the other. We did a great job, I think, of being unbiased in kind of deciding who to make fun of, right? But as the political climate has changed over the last, 4 or 6 years, it's not quite as fun anymore, right? The kind of comments that we're getting, the feedback that we get, it's very divisive, and it's a place that we would love to be in, but where the conversations are right now, I think we'd rather be in a place where we're spreading joy. We have this fantastic e-card product, and we are creating a lot of really good and funny content, right? So why not promote that, and why not let that be kind of the focus of what we do at Jibjab?
Makes sense. Now, from a competitive perspective, I know there's a lot of different things. I remember, like, around Christmas time, those elves and all those guys dancing around. So what do you guys look at that as? Is that competitive, or is that the best form of flattery? What do you look at from that perspective?
Sure. I mean, we've worked with and we've partnered with a lot of those companies in the past. So we don't necessarily think of them as competition, right? We're all kind of in this content creation space. I will say that one of the things that really has impressed me with Jibjab is we create really high quality content, right? Like, we have a creative team that is, makes up the bulk of the team, actually, internally. And, if people could hear the kind of conversations that happen in those creative meetings, these guys are brilliant, right? And they come up with really funny content. And, we don't necessarily just stick with one thing, right? We try different things, we try different partnerships. And I think for that reason, we've had a lot of success in continuing to drive retention with our audiences, and to drive new user growth, right? So definitely a field that I think we're winning in terms of quality.
Yeah, I did notice, a lot of the times when you go onto some of these other sites and you try to do the mix, it doesn't really look like me. It looks like I'm blended in with somebody. Do you guys, how do you guys handle stuff like that? Do you have a special secret sauce you use, or how do you guys, like, differentiate against some of these?
Yeah, we definitely have sauce. I'm not going to tell you guys exactly what that is, but we do like to play on the kitsch, right? It's a fun product. We're not trying to, there have been a lot of other products that have come out recently that where you can kind of use an AI, right, and pop a face in, right? And what we find is lacking there is the kitsch, the fun, right? We have these giant heads that kind of are very Jibjab-esque, right? Very, very Jibjab branded. Those jaw cuts where the jaws are kind of moving up and down. It's kitschy and it's fun, and it's something that you can send to your family, and they know immediately what it is, and they immediately, find joy out of it, right? And start laughing, send it to their friends. So, yeah, we do a lot of work to get there. I know it doesn't necessarily look like these, AI softwares that are out there, but we do a lot of work to make sure the hair looks right? Like the jaw cuts move in sync with the music. There's a lot of work that our creative team does to make sure that this looks, 100% kitsch.
Yeah, I don't look anything like those people, so I do appreciate the fact that it's my face. So. Now, you're in charge of user acquisition. right? So, what are the primary media channels that you guys are using to be, to go acquire users?
Yeah, our top right now is Facebook and Instagram. The way that we think about acquisition is, where are our users, right? We can go and test into TikTok or Snap, which we have done. However, is our user, who tends to be, a female 25 and up, right? Does that person necessarily live in TikTok? Not so much, right? They're in Facebook, they're on Google search, they're on Bing, they're in the affiliate space, right? Partnerships is huge for us, organic, social, and search, right? So when we look for where we can acquire users, we really look in the spaces that our users currently live on the internet. Display as well, right? Websites that are highly trafficked by this age group.
Makes sense. So how has that philosophy changed since you've been at Jibjab, or did you create that media focus? And where do you see that going? Do you, as the next generation comes about, where do you see that?
Sure, we've been in a lot for a long time. And, I think the only thing when it comes to the future of media is that it's going to change. And whatever is popular and everyone's in right now, that's going to move to some other channel, right, at some point. So we've been in a lot of these spaces in the past. We've really focused over the last 3 years on making those channels efficient, and ensuring that we're kind of spreading our user acquisition efforts across as many different channels as we can. The other thing that we do is we spend a lot of time testing and thinking about where we want to test into. I think that's, the best way to think about marketing, right, is to constantly be testing, right? Your audience changes day to day. The types of messaging they want to hear changes day to day. The creative that you use in one platform to another, that changes, right? And even within those platforms, it changes all the time, right? So a good example for us is we used to play very well in the right-hand rail of Facebook, right? And as that's disappeared, we've kind of been testing different types of creative that works in the newsfeed, and found that video creative tends to work very well because people can immediately understand the value prop of our product.
Okay. So with the pandemic and with all the stuff that's going on, have you seen your budget decrease? I mean, I've seen that in my world, dealing with a lot of companies. I've seen budgets have fluctuated. Are you feeling pinched there, or are you guys staying pre-COVID levels? How are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah, COVID has kind of been for a lot of retailers online. We've seen that explosive growth in usage. Jibjab has followed that same pattern, especially early in the pandemic when you weren't sure whether writing a card and sending it would send COVID along to that person, right? I think people really saw us as a solution. I think over the time of the last 8 months now, right, we've done a great job of creating content that people want to send during the pandemic. So our content efforts, our creative efforts have skyrocketed, and we've seen explosive user growth, largely due to that, right? Of course, we're spending more in all of our engines right now. We have been for the last 5 months, but I'd really say that what's helped drive that and sustain it, right? Because now we know you can send a card, it'll be fine, right? But why are we continuing to see good growth is because our content's really high quality. Our creative team has come up with funny cards related to the quarantine, right? We had a card that we produced and put out called Happy Quarantine Birthday. Just a hilarious original song. We talk about like Tiger King in there, pretty much anything related to the quarantine. And we've seen those cards perform, exceptionally. So definitely have seen that growth in terms of usage. seen the growth in terms of new users and definitely the growth in terms of spend across our media channels.
Gotcha. You guys are primarily working from home, like most other folks. Has that changed any philosophies, or has that made any difference in your job, or it's just status quo as before?
Yeah, I think our company actually did a great job. Jibjab did a great job of switching to work from home. In the past, we'd actually always had a one-day work from home benefit kind of at work. So most of us had systems set up for that. But we were quick. Our CEO was jumped on it right away. He knew that this was going to be a pretty big pandemic. We were one of the first companies to go to quarantine. And during that time, I think we were able to get a lot of the supplies we needed for our homes to ensure that we, were able to work. I think overall, our company's always been online, right? We use Slack channels quite a bit, right? I'm guessing the thing that is the hardest during this time is culture, right? How do you keep a culture alive and sustained, right? How do you keep creative engaged and creating great content? And I think a lot of that has really been culture, right? We've done a really good job there. We had a social distance ice cream party where Jibjab sent all of us ice cream via delivery, and then we all jumped on a Zoom and kind of ate ice cream together and hung out. We do lunches together on Zoom. We have a lot of Slack channels. We have one called Listening Party where we all come up with kind of different mixtapes and we chit chat about those together. So yeah, I think we've done a great job in terms of not just moving the work home and being able to communicate with each other, but we've done a great job of sustaining the culture at Jibjab and even being able to bring people on board and immediately kind of ingratiate themselves into the Jibjab culture that exists now.
What are you thinking about, like, the future, right? So eventually, hopefully, God willing, this pandemic ends. Those of you that believe in God. So what do you think 12 to 18 months out, 24 months out? What does the future look like for Jibjab?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are going to be. Yeah, I think I've mentioned this a bunch, but we have always focused on high quality content. I think COVID has kind of been a time where people are online and they're able to kind of access that content and utilize it, try it out, see if they like it. I think that's a really promising sign for Jibjab, right? You think of e-cards, it's an industry that kind of had a peak and has kind of, leveled off since then. But I think the future of the internet is e-cards and high quality content, right? Like at the end of the day, what is Instagram? What is TikTok? It's high quality content, right? It's high quality creative that people are putting together. We've just packaged it in a way that you can send it to your mom or your grandma, right? Or your sister, your brother, pretty easily. So I have a lot of faith in kind of that retention strategy that we can work with to retain those users. And a lot of that's based on high quality content. And then marrying that with the data that we have to kind of figure out who our highest lifetime value customers are, right? How to kind of segment out our customers, build lookalikes. And I think that one of the biggest fears that have been in the marketing space over the last year has really been pixels, right? Pixels are going away, right? And we need to have solutions for this, right? And I think that this actually helps us build a customer profile in a way that we have done in the past, but we can get a little more accurate with that customer profile, right? And we can understand where that customer lives and find them, not necessarily through pixels or through kind of chasing them around the internet, but knowing where they live and where they breathe on the internet, right? So I think this is a good thing, and I think this is gonna help a lot of people, kind of a lot of marketers especially, get to know their customers more and hopefully learn how to personalize messaging to them without being creepy, right? and without necessarily, making people concerned about what's happening on the internet when they're on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, data is near and dear to my heart. That's what we do. So, so that's the next point is how do you keep it from being creepy and Big Brother is watching you and that kind of thing. So, what are you guys looking at from the data and analytics perspective to where you can still do the targeting, the segmenting, in a cookieless, pixelless world going forward without being creepy, right? I mean, I think that's the holy grail for everything. But what are your philosophies on that? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, at the end of the day, look, I've been doing marketing for a while. I've done a lot of paid, a lot of lower funnel, mid funnel stuff. I've always felt that that's a problematic way to do marketing, right? While you're looking at efficiencies, are you truly looking at efficiencies, right? When you look at all these different marketing channels and their attributions, right? The way that they're setting up attribution windows, are you just deduping across many different channels as you're testing, right? Probably, right? And whatever your goal is to get there, you're probably spending 2 to 3 times as much for those users, right? So by getting that low funnel, have we truly become more efficient, right? Or are we just kind of hitting the same customers over and over and over in different channels? I am a proponent of kind of moving up in the funnel and really hitting the customer at all parts of the journey, right? And I think if you have a high quality product, it's much easier, right? And I think that even when you see something like the evolution of CTV, right, and where it's come, or TV in general, very high funnel, top of funnel, right? You're trying to kind of get more granular, as granular as possible, right? But at the end of the day, you should know what channels your customers are watching, right? You should know where your customer is, and you should be utilizing that data to kind of pull them into the funnel so that you can, reach out to them via email or some of your lower funnel channels to pull them back in, right? And I think that what we're going to find is similar to something like the Facebook boycott, right? I think what we're learning is channel attribution is a big problem, right, in this industry, and pixels haven't necessarily done exactly what we wanted them to do, right? So I'm actually pretty hopeful. I think that this will help us become better marketers. It'll help us to learn to speak to our customers in a more intelligent way and in a way that speaks to their emotions a little bit more and helps them understand the value of our products.
No, I totally agree. You pretty much did my sales pitch there. But so that leads me to the one of the questions I had with you guys are heavy in Facebook and Instagram and stuff, as you mentioned. How has the social boycott affected anything, or has it affected anything? Did it make you rethink any of your philosophies, or is this just a sidebar that just happened in the industry?
Yeah, Facebook's always a very important channel for us. I think as a company, we're a pretty diverse company, and we try to create a product that works for people, of all backgrounds, right? I think the boycott for us it's nice, right? Because as a marketer, sure, you have these goals and things you want to do, but at the end of the day, people are people, right? And you want to support people, right? So for us to support something like a Facebook boycott, for all of the reasons that were kind of brought up, we're happy to do that. Now, can we do that long term and forever? Probably not, right? Our users do live on Facebook. We do have to be there to an extent. But I think what we've kind of learned coming out of that is Facebook, is their attribution window, a little like helpful to Facebook, right? Like I think a lot of our suspicions have been confirmed. That doesn't necessarily mean we won't work in Facebook. It just means that we kind of think in new ways about how we live in that atmosphere. and how we kind of diversify our marketing channels as we move forward.
So you don't do much in TV now, right? But that's everybody in marketing. That's the holy grail of marketing, and as you move through what you do. What are your thoughts on TV and CTV and streaming? How has that affected anything, or has it affected anything? Because, like you mentioned, the funnels are kind of starting to blend together now. With CTV, you can do addressable and stuff like that. Has that led to any thoughts on what you guys are planning in the future, or it's okay, it's there and we'll look at it later?
Yeah, we've always been in TV during Q4. That's kind of our busiest time, Christmas, right? So we have familiarity with TV. We've worked in the TV space. We know it's important. We have ways that we kind of measure, right? Like as anyone in TV does, right? Where you say, okay, I'm seeing this kind of user growth on my site after this TV commercial has aired, right? So we do try to apply some data to that. I think what we've seen in the TV landscape over time, and I know you're a TV guy, so look, I used to work FTD. We used to do a lot of business during Valentine's Day, a lot of business during Mother's Day. Because of Valentine's Day, we would run during the Super Bowl. I remember we pulled out of the Super Bowl ads citing price, right? And sure, the first year everything was fine, right? But if you look at the time that was those ads were pulled, and then they continued to kind of not be on TV during the Super Bowl, you see the brand decline over time because TV is important, right? Branding is important. People need to know where you are. And that's always kind of stuck in my mind as something that's very important for marketers to understand. Your marketing funnel is going to die. It's going to dry out, right? Like you can't just keep remarketing and saying, hey, this user's really cheap. I'll just keep going after this person. You've got to fill that funnel at some point, right? So I think TV, the agencies we've worked with, there've been a lot of new agencies kind of popping up too who are saying, hey, here's a more data-driven model for television. We've seen that explosive growth in CTV over the last year, 2 years, which is definitely a little further down the funnel. But I think TV is doing a good job, right? Like one of my favorite things that they do right now is kind of marrying the display ads with your TV ads and tracking that user, right? And getting them to purchase down the line, right? So you get a little bit of that understanding of what's the value of the branding that I'm doing on TV, and how is that filling my funnel long term, right? So yeah, I mean, if you're a marketer and you're not in TV, especially if you're not in CTV, you should be in there, right? You should be testing it out and looking at what happens to your brand, right? What happens to your brand search, even if that's a good indicator of kind of what's happening to your brand over time.
How does that affect your creative, right? So, when you're looking at doing your creatives, do you guys apply certain things for certain medium? Because a lot of times I have my customer that say, "Oh, I ran a TV ad. Can you throw this on CTV?" Right? It might not necessarily be the right thing. How do you guys look at creative versus channel versus media? You have something that you do there?
Yeah, we have mentioned this a few times. Our creative team, stellar, right? I think as marketers, what we try to do is marry their creative juices with our marketing brains, right? And say, hey, how can we not only make a commercial for TV that captures the eye, right, gets people interested, helps them understand the value prop of this product, but also get them to move down the funnel and purchase, right? So I think for TV specifically versus maybe something like Facebook or CTV even, we think about where that person is in the funnel and what next step we want from them, right? So maybe on a TV level, you're kind of top to mid funnel, right? You're like, here's our product. This is where you can find it. We have a web product, we have an app product, right? Go check it out. Versus Facebook, where we might say, hey, like, here's our product. It's great. It's funny, right? You want to send it to your family. You want them to laugh, right? Here's a direct click that you can hit, right, to get to the site. We might even change up the language there and say, check us out at jibjab.com, right? Or click the button below, right? Because we can get them to actually click in that medium versus something like TV, where we're still hitting them at the middle funnel best, right?
That makes sense. And you guys deploy the same creative people across both what you do with the users versus what you do for marketing. You haven't kind of segregated out the creative teams. It's the same group.
We have, but we have such a strong creative team, and they're just so brilliant, right? The kinds of things they come up with just knocks me off my feet. I'm like, they're like, we're gonna have a new birthday video, and I'm just expecting some sort of generic birthday video, and it just turns out to be hilarious, right? And they've put together some content, they've written a song, right, and built a whole video around it. Why not use that talent for something like marketing, right? We give them some marketing tips. We give them feedback on, how can we get a user to kind of laugh at this and then also take an action. So we work with them closely, but I think when you have that talent, you should just utilize them in your marketing campaigns. And yeah, like, I think that's also comes with challenges sometimes, right? In terms of a creative person learning to kind of make an ad that it's not the prettiest thing, right? You're like, I need this button to really stand out. And they're just like cringing, right? They're like, oh, it's going to look so ugly. But you're like, hey, we can test different versions of this and see what works. It wins. And I think it's also helped our creative team over time really think about creative in those different mediums, right? How do I create good content? How do I create good content that people click on and purchase the video from?
Got it. Also, from all the celebrities and stuff that you guys have, is that a concerted effort? You guys go and hunt these guys down and say, hey, we want you to be part of it? Or has it been more people coming and saying, hey, this is great, I want to be on it? Or is it a mix?
It's a mix of both. We've done a lot of reaching out. We work with a lot of record labels to get access to a lot of good content. We have reached out to different artists as well, but we have a lot of people reach out to us actually for partnerships, especially when you think of how we can kind of marry our talents together, right? I think a good example of a really cool partnership that we did over Christmas that I loved was with the Jonas Brothers, right? They had this great Christmas song. There was no video for it. We worked with them and basically created a Jibjab video that goes with this song and that people could, create for free, right? And get those people into our funnel, get them familiar with the product, and celebrate the holidays, have a good time, right? So I think that's something that will continue, right? Especially as we continue to work with different partners and have these great partnerships. We brought in a great partnerships manager recently, and she's, really done a great job of kind of piquing interest with a lot of our partners, and working with our partners to create good products for them that they're excited to come on board with Jibjab for. So.
Is that a effective marketing channel as well, or is it? And what I mean by that is from you hear about influencers and all that on social media. Do you look at these partnerships as a marketing tool as like influencers, or is it more of a creative side that, hey, it's fun and you'll get more retention that way by having it, or is it both?
Yeah, I'd say it's both, but really focused on the latter, more so than the former. We've done some influencer marketing and testing in the past. Um, Definitely hard to measure. I don't know if it truly qualifies as top of funnel in a lot of aspects, right? Um, how many of these followers are real, right? Like, you always kind of run into fraud, right, in marketing. So we haven't seen a ton of success out of the influencer side of things, but we have worked with a lot of partners. Someone like Jonas Brothers, they have real fans, right? Like, we know this. We know those fans are going to make this e-card and enjoy it, send it to their family. But we also have a decent amount of partners that are not necessarily just artists, right? So we work with Kayak, right? We work with a lot of other big brands to see how we can kind of help each other across all our products. And yeah, it's a big channel for us. I think, especially as our internal data and analytics product has improved over time, we're really able to see the impact of what's happening with partnerships, and especially at a top of funnel, what that happens in terms of what happens to the long term, right? We might not see an immediate lift in users from a partnership, but what we've seen is over 6 months, over 12 months, those partnerships do bring in a lot of new customers that we are able to retain.
That leads me to my next question on metrics. So how do you guys define what is successful and what's not successful with your media and your partnerships and the stuff you're doing? Is there any one particular, well, of course, it's how many users you have, but is there anything aside from that that you look at to measure success, to say, yeah, these campaigns are successful, or this media is more successful than another?
Yeah. We definitely look at purchases, right? We look at the efficiency of those purchases. We look at things like how that user's journeying through the site, what are their channels they're hitting. Depending on the channel too, we might look at different metrics, right? So for Facebook, we might look at engagement metrics. We might also look at deeper down the funnel, like, what is that person saying about the product that we're posting, right? We also look at things like, for a Facebook user, right? Are they purchasing, right? Do they come back and purchase longer term, right? If we bring in an app user, we might say, how long does it take this person to actually purchase, right? Our app is an amazing product. It's one of the top apps in the App Store for sure. But right, we have some free content in there, right? We have some free gifts, right? So how long does it take for someone to go in, download the app, install it, right? Start using it, register, and then how long is that person using these gifts until they actually purchase an e-card? Those are all things that we look at to kind of understand our user and speak to them in different ways across our different mediums.
Do you use different mediums for acquisition versus retention, or is the same mediums for both?
Yeah, I mean, we use email definitely for retention purposes. We do use our channels for both retention and first purchase, right? So building good customer segments helps us with building things like lookalike audiences to engage a top of funnel audience that's ready to purchase, high purchase intent. But we also, look at remarketing, and we don't necessarily want to spend all of our time and efforts on remarketing in those channels, but we do look at the full user journey across all of our channels, and we try to engage them where we think it's most likely that we'll get them to purchase.
Great, thank you. I want to open it up for questions. So the millions of people that are tuning in, if you have questions for Hannah, please send them our way. Here. In the interim, tell us, you're located in LA, right?
We are, and we're going a heat wave right now that's just been it's been killer. So we're all living off our AC. I was really worried that there'd be like a rolling blackout in the middle of this, so I had to make sure my computer was fully stocked up and charged. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, the grumbling you hear in the back is not my stomach. We're actually having a storm here in Florida, so apologize for the background noise there. Any questions for him? Don't see any. So Adam, hand it back to you unless I see some questions popping up.
Awesome. No, fantastic session. Great way to close it out. Yeah. And Hannah, by the way, just this whole time, the guitar collection really has my eyes drawn, by the way. We haven't covered that at all. Here's your platform. We're going to have to talk about that briefly.
Yeah, I've played guitar for about 20 years now. So, yeah, it's cool. This one right here is my dad's. It's an old Yamaha from like the 70s.
Awesome.
So cool. But yeah, definitely gotten into all the stringed instruments at one point. I'm guessing you're also a guitar player.
No, just merely a fan of someone with the time and talent and resource to invest in it. So no, I mean, look, we what's one of the running themes here, right, is the new way people engage, the new way we interact, the new way we sort of share and what that means. And, you know, Jibjab really sort of at the heart of that a little bit. So I think it's, you know, about who you are personally. I don't think ever before, at least in my career, who you are personally is so tied into how you behave professionally, right? And it sort of has pulled down the veil of this. And I'm not saying professional courtesy and professionalism is out the door, but it has pulled down the veil. It's connected us in a different way. And so I think, yeah, just who you are, especially as a marketer, right? If marketing is a study of consumer behavior, then who we are as consumers is more important than ever. So yeah, I spotted it. I was curious, and makes me think, you know, just more about our business and the way we understand people and how you as a marketer talk to customers, right? I mean, what's your goal? Talk to your customers, find new ones, create experiences, share content. There's never been a more prevalent time for that really just foundational thinking of how we market products.
Yeah, definitely. It's true. I think a lot of my experience in music helps me ground myself and kind of understand how maybe a customer for a product that also brings people joy, how do they want to be talked to, right? How do they want to understand what our product is? So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that lens. I think you have to think about it that way. I think the biggest mistake we can ever make as marketers, as product developers and engineers is, would I do that? Would I engage in that way? Like we can never forget to put our consumer hat on because we are all in it. And, you know, I think none of us, I think, would be ashamed to say that we have sort of an echo chamber in our business, right? And I think there are times when we really have to sort of shake ourselves out of it and remind ourselves that we're consumers, you know, talk to our friends, take social polls, like how would they engage with a product, right? Let's just not think of people as audiences and targeting, but people and communication. And how do we take some of that basic foundational thinking into our business? I think we'll all benefit from it now and in every odd year that we are likely to face in our future here. So Anna, Ahmed, thank you so much for closing out today's event. Awesome dialogue, awesome conversation. Thank you to everybody who participated in today's event. Special thanks to our speakers for all the education and insights today. Thank you, Cisco, for providing us a great platform. For those listening, those ready to dial into your next session, tomorrow, Brand Innovators, 1 p.m., our inaugural live cast on luxury brands. It should be an awesome event. We are going to be joined from marketing leaders from JP Morgan, Pernod Ricard, WPP, you know, buyers, sellers, brand marketers, another fantastic group, a fantastic event. Thank you all for joining today. Everyone, go out there, make an impact, be kind to someone, and have a fantastic day. And we'll see you all soon.